Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Fibertruck 95 Flight Sim, and today we're back with our Friday game day flights here on the channel. And today we're going to be doing a very special game day flight. This one is being back to baseball season once again, and we're doing the Cincinnati Reds in the Pittsburgh Pirates series here today. So, yes, it's been over almost a whole month since our last stream back in April 5th, and now it's May 1st already. Can you believe how fast time flies? Which is pretty crazy to hear, of course. And yes, we're actually starting here in an earlier time and decided, you know what? I want to start at 1500 Zulu, 10 a.m. my time. I want to start a little bit earlier in the day, just to have a chill earlier in the day flying here earlier in the day. So that is why we're here this early. So if you guys don't know anything about the Reds and Pirates, these two historic teams of the NL Central this year, these two historic teams in the NL Central have won a very impressive amount of championships combined. These two franchises in total have won a combined 10 World Series championships between the Pirates and the Reds. And both these teams date all the way back to the 1800s, back into the later half of the 19th century. These are very old teams, very rich histories, tons of great players that played for both the Pirates and the Reds. At one point, this rivalry was much more bigger in the 1970s, of course. This was a big-time rivalry. But now this year, though, they're both actually pretty good this year. The Pirates and the Reds are actually quite decent this year. The Pirates are 16-16. The Reds have the tie for the second best record in the National League. So, pretty crazy stuff this year. So this should be a pretty interesting NL Central matchup. So before we get started, I do want to say hello to everyone in chat. Pappy Deck Finder, good to see you. Yes, I'm at KSDF. Yes. Good to see you, Pappy Duck Finder. Yes, we're in KSDF. That is Louisville Sanderford. Yes, SDF is is the airport we're at here today. And yes, we are starting in Louisville, Kentucky today. For two reasons. Number one, the AAA affiliate of the Reds, the Louisville Bats, actually play here in Louisville. So we're going to see Louisville Slugger Field and see Louisville. Secondly, as it turns out, if you guys aren't aware about sport events, guess what's going to be coming tomorrow? Yes, the Kentucky Derby's tomorrow. So we'll fly over we're going to fly over briefly into Churchill Downs, of course. So KSDF is where we're at here today. I don't have flow, so I don't have access to a nearest airport indicator. So we're going to be flying from here, from Louisville International. We'll make our way over to Churchill Downs. Then from there, we'll fly around the Louisville Slugger Museum and Factory. This is, of course, where the famous Louisville Slugger baseball bats are made. I know this place quite well. From there, we'll travel around to Louisville Slugger Field, the home of the Bats, the AAA baseball team of the Reds. They're the AAA affiliates. Then we'll fly around the Ohio River, and we'll make our way over to downtown Cincinnati. We'll fly over Great American Ballpark, the home of the Reds since 2003. Then from there, we'll make our way through Lincoln Airfield, and then we'll go and make our first stop at Pike County Airport, because it's halfway between both of the airports on the flight plan. Then from Pike County, we'll head our way east over to PNC Park, one of the baseball's most beautiful stadiums in Major League Baseball. And then we'll fly around downtown Pittsburgh, and we make our way to Allegheny County Airport. So that's going to be our flight plan for today. Pretty simple. Pretty simple flight plan here today. So, I'm on PC. I'm on PC, Paffy Duck Fighter. I don't have PS5. I'm on a gaming PC. But good question though. But we're gonna take the Twin Otter today this morning. So the Twin Otter, of course, we should be going around 160 knots. I think that's where I want to go near today. Is hit a speed of 160. Don't want to go too fast with this thing, but I don't want to go super slow either. So we're gonna go. So we're gonna key around there. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's PS5 cross-platform. Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, PS5 doesn't have cross-platform. That I do feel for you for that. No worries. I do feel for you though. It's tough for the PlayStation people. I wish you guys can join the Xbox and PC pilots because I think that would be really cool. But I hope that happens someday. I really do. So we're gonna get this Twin Otter started, the Twatter. In real life, this is a very famous STOL aircraft, very popular in the island nations, also Canada. It's a very popular. So I've been started since I started this. I mean, thankfully, this is not a difficult aircraft to get. So, KSDF, if you guys aren't aware about Louisville Sanford, SDF, of course. KSDF is Louisville Muhammad Ali International Airport. Of course, this airport is not really that big in passenger travel. Last year was 4.59 million people flew out of Louisville last year, so it's not a lot of passengers out of Louisville. It has been growing since COVID. However, that's not what Louisville International is most famous for. Louisville International is far more of a cargo hub. In fact, it's one of the busiest cargo airports in the world. It's the third biggest one in the United States, behind only Anchorage and Memphis. And the reason for that, of course, is because this is the main hub airport for UPS. This is UPS's #1 hub for UPS travel. UPS flies out of Louisville to all sorts of places. Far north is Anchorage. They've flown as far east as Dubai. Far west is Hong Kong. They fly all over the globe out of Louisville. They fly to Europe. They fly to Mexico. They basically fly almost everywhere but Australia and South America. They've flown all over the place. But yeah, Louisville International, much more of a cargo hub. So go ahead and start the left engine. I'm going to go ahead and start these engines, of course. So definitely get these engines started. So we're going to go ahead and get the left engine started. So we're going to be flying up the Derby. The Kentucky Derby is going to happen tomorrow, of course, is the Derby. But if you guys aren't aware about the Kentucky Derby that's going to happen tomorrow, this is America's most famous horse race in America, if not one of the world's most famous horse racing events. It's been inaugurated ever since 1875, over 150 years ago. which is crazy. Over 150 years ago, the most signed 2 minutes in sports, of course. One of the older horse racing events in the country. Though it's not the oldest horse racing event in the United States, there are ones even older. The Belmont Stakes and Preakness are actually older, and the Traveler Stakes in Saratoga Springs are all older than Louisville, are older than the Kentucky Derby. However, the Kentucky Derby is still very historic, and it's the most watched attended horse race in America. So, huge sport event. It's a huge thing here in Louisville. It is the biggest sport event here in the city. And I'm not kidding. It's a very, very big event here in the city, of course. So, pretty cool stuff. The Derby's had rich history, of course. Some very famous champions. The festival here is incredible. Like, the Derby is a big piece of Louisville history, of course. So we'll fly over Churchill Downs, and we'll be So for this leg, of course, we'll fly 2,000 feet for pretty much of the legs. Will be 2,000 feet. So our direction is going to be 326 degrees heading. So yeah, Louisville's a huge cargo hub, big cargo hub. Now, of course, Louisville is rich in baseball history. If you guys aren't aware about Louisville for baseball, Louisville has had a rich baseball history, more so than many other cities, actually. Of course, Louisville used to have professional teams. They even had a team in the National League. Louisville used to have Major Baseball, of course. The last such team, of course, was the Louisville Colonels. Used to be the team back in the early 20th century. And of course, nowadays, when people think about Louisville and baseball, you guys all think about the baseball bats here in Louisville, Kentucky. From the Hillrick family has made the legendary Louisville Slugger baseball bats. And they've been a mainstay for Major League Baseball for over a century plus. And of course, it all started with the Louisville Slugger himself, Pete Browning. And of course, it grew ever since, starting with Honus Wagner to his first athletic endorsement of a product. And ever since, so many other legends have wielded Louisville Slugger baseball bats. Babe Ruth, Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, Jackie Robinson, Roberto Clemente, Hank Aaron, King Griffith Jr., and more have all used Louisville Slugger baseball bats. So lots of baseball history in Louisville. Rich history. Oh, to let out my interweave, Sips. Oh yeah, side games. Oh, that's right. I actually heard about that. Yes, they actually sponsored the. Yeah, they're now one of the sponsors of the Kentucky Derby. Which is really cool. Which is really cool to hear. Some interesting new sponsors of the Derby, of course, here in Louisville. Very big deal, but yeah, definitely really big news, of course. Side Games are also now sponsoring a football club in Europe. Yes, they sponsored Juventus as their back of the shirt sponsor for Juventus. So, pretty cool. So here it is, guys. Churchill Downs here in Louisville. There's also the University of Louisville. There's the University of Louisville football and baseball stadiums for the University of Louisville. Nowadays, it's now much more known for major events. And there's the famous horse racing grounds here in Louisville. So we'll take a picture. But these horse racing grounds are very, very impressive. But Churchill Downs, of course, where the Derby is held, it can host up to 170,000 people, which is insane for a horse racing competition, of course. We've done a lot of all this stuff. And here's the crazy part, though. The Churchill Downs isn't even the only major horse racing facility in the state of Kentucky. Because it turns out Kentucky has another equally legendary racetrack, Keeneland, which definitely was much later, but Keeneland was a very famous horse racing track. Is at Keeneland. And it's near Lexington, of course, which is the horse capital of the world in Lexington, Kentucky. So, if you want to find the best state for horses and stuff, if you're a horse lover, Kentucky's far and away the best state in the United States for that sort of stuff, of course. So here's downtown Louisville. And of course, this is where my neck of the woods. I don't live far from Louisville, Kentucky, so this is my neck of the woods. The Bats play in the fitting stadium of Louisville Slugger. So this here, guys, is the Louisville Slugger baseball bat. That's not hard to miss if you know anything about baseball. The Louisville Slugger baseball bat is not hard to miss. It's a 120-foot tall metal bat. It's the biggest bat in the world. There's the Young Center, home of the University of Louisville basketball. Get this, 22,000 people attend seats for Louisville basketball, the biggest basketball-only arena in the country is here in Louisville, and this here is Slugger Field, home of the Bats. Finally, of course, this area here nowadays, this area here is now a home of a soccer ground for Louisville City Football Club, Lou City, the best minor league soccer team in America. And I'm actually serious. Lou City is the greatest minor league soccer team in the country. So we're going to climb up. So we're going to climb up to 1,000 feet, and we're going to fly along the Ohio River, of course. So we'll talk about the Reds and Pirates, of course, as we get through here. So we finally got our bit of notes. So as we climb up to our altitude, we're going to go ahead and start talking about the Pirates and Reds rivalry this year. This rivalry, they played in the NL Central between the Pittsburgh Pirates and Cincinnati Reds. And both teams have been active for rivals for more than 135 seasons of baseball, dating back to the infancy of Major League Baseball. And of course, the the Pirates currently the regular season rivalry with 1,254 wins and 1,234 losses. However, the Reds have been the more successful team in the postseason, as it turns out. 13-8. These teams are very old, very historic teams in baseball. You have the Reds, who is where Cincinnati is where professional baseball was founded. And of course, Pittsburgh has a really rich baseball history too. But for the early parts of the 20th century, both teams struggled to get out of the gate. Of course, the Pirates saw most of their roster being decimated as they most defected to the Players League, though they did have brief successful periods during the new century, including 3 straight pennants from 1901-1903 and their first World Series championship in 1909. Cincinnati, however, fared much worse, as they didn't even qualify to the postseason until 1919, and yes, they managed to win the 1919 World Series, but only because there was an infamous scandal in that, because the White Sox team had an infamous scandal simply known as the Black Sox scandal. And if you guys don't know about baseball history, the Black Sox scandal is one of the biggest black marks in sports history, in American sports. Basically, it was game fixing scandals, which got 8 members of the Chicago White Sox, they intentionally lose in order for payment from a gambling syndicate. And this scandal caused many of the players to be permanently banned from the game, including, most famously, Shoeless Joe Jackson. But it tainted the Reds' legacy of their first World Series. The Pirates did stay competitive during the 1920s, and they won another title in 1925. And both clubs managed various levels of success at various times, though they often avoid each other in the postseason. In 1940, the Reds got another World Series championship in 1940, of course. And the Pirates were in the midst of a playoff drought for nearly 2 decades, though by the end of the 50s, the Pirates had been returned back to their successful ways, winning a title in 1960 by defeating the New York Yankees. And that was a very memorable World Series championship as they beat the Yankees dynasty. Though the Reds the next year won the pennant the next year, but they lost to the Yankees. However, this was nothing compared to the 1970s, because the 70s is the golden age of the Reds-Pirates rivalry. Not only did both teams move to new ballparks, but the Pirates and Reds have won their divisions throughout the first half of the decade. And that means when they won their divisions, they got to meet each other plenty in the playoffs. And their first major postseason matchup was the 1970 NLCS. And both teams had stars and legends. The Pirates had Roberto Clemente and Blue Stargell and Steve Blass, while the Reds had their legendary offense, the Big Red Machine, featuring Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Tony Perez, and Joe Morgan. And despite the Pirates' best efforts, the Reds swept them out of the door. The Reds had dominated and swept the Pirates in the NLCS. However, unfortunately for the Reds, of course, the 1970 World Series Championship, of course, for the Reds, 1970, unfortunately for the Reds, they ran into a problem as the Reds ended up actually losing the World Series that year to the Baltimore Orioles, who had a great team. Of course, the next year, however, following their loss, the next year the Pirates managed to win another World Series against the Orioles in 1971. Then, of course, there was the 1972 matchup in the 1972 NLCS. Once again, another NLCS clash. And it would prove to be a very tough one. Tough series, and eventually went into Game 7. One particular note, of course, was Game 5 of the 1972 NLCS was also the final game ever for Roberto Clemente, who, unfortunately for him and tragically, he was tragically killed in a plane crash when after volunteering for Earthquake Week in Nicaragua. And it was Roberto Clemente's final game ever. But in the end, of course, it was a big another win for the Reds, but once again they failed to win a championship into the World Series. And once again, the Reds did not win the World Series because they ended up facing the Oakland A's, and the Reds unfortunately didn't really. They lost in Game 7. They lost in that. And of course, they met again in 1975, but it was not an eventful series. The Reds completely dominated with a 3-game sweep, and this time, unlike the last 2 times the Reds beat the Pirates in the NLCS, the Reds finally win a championship because they finally win their first World Series of the Big Red Machine era. As the Reds end up then taking on the Red Sox, which would prove to be an absolute classic World Series, one of the best of World Series, of most famous World Series of all time. But the Reds actually won Game 7, finally the Big Red Machine their first World Series championship as the Big Red Machine. And it's one of the greatest World Series ever, in fact, in 1975. Then, of course, at the very end of their dynasty, the Reds once again pulled ahead of the weak NL West, and they faced the Pirates again. But this time, Pittsburgh finally got it, and they decimate the Reds in a humiliating sweep, which was the sweep on their way to the World Series championship in 1979, defeating the Orioles, and this is actually the last time the Pirates have won the World Series in 1979. Unfortunately for this rivalry, both teams were regressed significantly since their 70s heyday. Ironically for the Reds, they did have the best record in 1981, but then the players' strike decimated the entire season, while the Pirates sink deep into mediocrity. Though the Pirates and Reds rivalry did resurge, however, in 1990. Thanks to the fact the Pirates went back to relevancy thanks to its all-stars, Barry Bonds, Bobby Bonilla, Neil Heaton, and Doug Drabeck. While the Reds surprised the league with manager Lou Piniella, boasting talents like Eric Davis, Jose Rio, Randy Myers, and Chris Sabo to dominate the NL West. And they met in the 1990 World Series, 1990 NLCS, and it was a pretty big game. But in the end, in 6 games, despite low scoring, the Reds took care of business, and they slowed down their incredibly dominant hitters for the Pirates. And then the Reds then shocked baseball by completely sweeping the Oakland Athletics in the 1990 World Series, which is the last time the Reds have won a World Series. Though afterwards, the Reds declined massively thanks to the fact of the terrible ownership of Mark Schott, who's also a terrible person. And multiple stars did leave in free agency. And of course, with the league expansion, the Reds and Pirates were formed in the new Central, turning the once-heated playoff rivalry into divisional battle. But even then, the Reds and Pirates weren't super relevant. The Pirates particularly had it even worse than the Reds, as the Pirates didn't even make a single winning season from 1993 to 2013. And the Reds didn't have a winning season until from 2001 to 2009. Though the rivalry did have some relevancy back in 2012, and they did face off in the 2013 NL wildcard game, but it ended up being a win for the Pirates as they managed to win the wildcard game 6-1. But they fell into the NLDS to the Cardinals. And then, of course, both teams then declined again, as it turns out that the Reds and Pirates once again declined. Though that being said, nowadays, there might actually be a decent future for the Pirates and Reds. The Pirates have Paul Skeens, though how long that's going to last. And of course, for the Reds, they're doing great this year. So that's a bit of the history of the rivalries between these two. So that concludes the history of the Pirates-Red rivalry between the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Cincinnati Reds. These two absolutely historic rivals have a lot of history, of course, and some legendary talents over the years. So I know a lot of you guys have been asking how my vacation went. I actually had a great time on my vacation. So if you guys weren't aware, I went. I flew into Southampton from Cincinnati. I flew into London from Cincy. On it was, let's see what it was. I flew in on Thursday from Wednesday night to Thursday morning. Then we had a day in Southampton, which was really nice. Southampton's a really cool English coastal town. Then we had our 2-week cruise, which lasted from April 11th to the 25th, which was definitely pretty cool. And we had some amazing stuff. This was an amazing trip. We got to see so many amazing cities. Now I'll talk more about the vacation, not this Saturday, but next Saturday. Which next Saturday is going to be a trip to, which is going to be a flight from Southampton to Jerez, which is Cadiz, which is actually to Cadiz, of course. And we'll be doing some, and we'll talk all about the trip on that flight. Don't want to talk about it here, but we had some amazing stuff. But if we had to pick a favorite from the trip, our favorite city, it was Barcelona. Barcelona was absolutely incredible. What an amazing, amazing city. Barcelona is such an incredible city. What an incredible city, though. Barcelona is amazing. The architecture was incredible. Beautiful architecture. The coast was beautiful. The architecture was incredible. The weather was perfect at Barcelona. So many amazing out of this world sights, beaches. It just had everything. The traffic wasn't that bad. And most importantly, it was just, this was a place I wanted to come back, was Barcelona. If I ever did a Mediterranean cruise, I would start in Barcelona. And more importantly, the port wasn't even that far from downtown. So, really great. Cadiz, our first port in Cadiz, really great port. Beautiful city, of course. We got to visit Cadiz was really nice. Cadiz was a nice city, and we also visit the Arco di Frontera. That was a really cool community there. That was a beautiful community there too. Toulon was our least favorite port. Was Toulon, France? It was our least favorite, but it was actually not a bad port. It was just, it wasn't nearly as special as some of the other ones. Livorno, which is Florence and Pisa, that was really great too. Florence was a beautiful city. So many really cool things in Florence. Pisa was also nice too. Get to see the Leaning Tower. That's always a joy to see. And the cathedral was pretty interesting too. Rome, man. Oh boy, where do I begin with Rome? History is everything in Rome. We got to see the Forum, the Colosseum, Constantine's Arch. It was absolutely insane. And here's the crazy thing. We got here on a Sunday, and it was still tons of people. Like, there were crowds everywhere. And it was on a Sunday, mind you, which is normally the least busy day. I can't even imagine what the crowds be like on the weekdays. I can't even imagine how many people are going to be there. Rome was absolutely insane, and we got to visit the Vatican too, which we got to see St. Peter's Cathedral, which is the St. Peter's Basilica. Absolutely insane place. Rome was nuts, and then Ajaccio, which was Napoleon's home, that was also really cool. Corsica looked absolutely beautiful. It's actually our favorite French port. And the cruise port was really close to downtown. We could walk straight into downtown, and we got to see some really cool stuff in Ajaccio. Beautiful town. We really enjoyed Corsica. But yeah, overall, very nice trip. though sadly for us, it will probably be the last time we're going to be in Europe for a while because, well, with how much ad fuel prices have been and how crazy it is, we're going to put a hold on the trips to Europe. So we'll just be going through all this. So we'll be doing that, of course. So pretty interesting stuff, though, of course, with Europe, but very nice time. I got me plenty of souvenirs, but I basically got souvenirs for pretty much most of the places we visited. KDIF, I got the KDIF Cathedral up there. It's back there. For Barcelona, I got the souvenirs from Espanyol, from RCD Espanyol, my favorite Spanish club. I got me a souvenir from them. Toulon, I didn't really get any souvenir from Toulon. Florence and Pisa, I didn't get anything from Florence and Pisa, sadly. I did get one from Rome and the Vatican, the Colosseum and St. Peter's. It's in St. James Square. So I did get that. But really cool place to visit. Really neat. Really, really cool. So that is what's going on. And in terms of other sports, this week, of course, there's been a lot going on since the last couple of weeks since I've been gone. So a lot of things have been gone. In terms of other sports and other sport events, of course, there's been a lot of stuff going on since then. But to recap other sports, for baseball, of course, since this is what we're talking about, the Reds are first, the NL Central. Go Reds! Up the Cincinnati Reds. The Pirates are in last place of the NL Central. That being said, they're nowhere near the worst team in the National League. Hell, the Pirates are doing better than the Phillies and Mets this year. I mean, the Mets spent $400 million, and they have a far worse record than the Pirates. Hell, the Pirates aren't even that bad. The Pirates are actually decent. If they've been most of the other divisions, for example, if they play the NL East, they would have been second in the NL East. They would have been at least third or fourth in the NL West. The NL Central this year has been extremely good this year. The Cubs are playing well. The Cardinals are doing quite good. Even the Brewers aren't doing bad. But the best team in the National League has been the Braves. They've been on all cylinders this year for Atlanta. In the American League, the American League has been dominated by the Yankees, and Rays have been the two best teams in the American League this year. So very interestingly, though, the AL West is ruled by the Athletics, and the Central has been the Guardians and Tigers. So I'm very curious to see how things will turn out, though. But it's still early in the season, but so far so good for baseball, of course. In terms about the football world, international football, the Premier League has changed significantly. And yes, Tottenham is in the relegation spot. Yes, they're 2 points behind West Ham. And of course, I think it's likely they could get relegated. West Ham's got Brentford, which aren't doing so hot right now. And then for Tottenham, well, they're going against Villa. at Villa. So if Tottenham lose and West Ham win, they would be 5 points back on West Ham with only 3 matches left to go. Can you guys believe if Tottenham Hotspur got relegated? That would be the single biggest relegation the Premier League has ever had. Ever. It's not just any club, it's one of the biggest clubs in England. They could get relegated. Italy has seen Inter Milan still dominating the league, and Como still keeping a European spot. But it's definitely Inter's league to lose. Inter Milan are probably going to win the league soon. In Spain, Barcelona is looking to completely dismantle the league this week. Barcelona looks like to pretty much seal their title. Barcelona's been unstoppable. Espanyol, well, they still haven't won a game all year in 2026. And Espanyol are now just 5 points away from relegation. They were 5th at one point. They now are relegation. Oh, I've been dreading this. Been dreading that. Of course, the Champions League. On Wednesday, the PSG Bayern game was a total classic. PSG won that game 5-4. It was an absolute classic, one of the best Champions League games this year. And I have a strong feeling whoever wins, PSG or Bayern, whoever wins, probably win the Champions League this year. Just saying. So, a lot of stuff going on in sports. So, let's go ahead and talk a bit about the Cincinnati Reds. The Redlegs, of course. They are actually one of the older teams. They've been dating back since 1890. They were a chartered member of the American Association in 1881 before joining the NL in 1890. But yes, this is a very old baseball team. Very old. Cincinnati, after all, is the birthplace of professional baseball. So Cincinnati has an extremely rich baseball history. The Reds are the most dominant era of the Reds, of course, was the 1970s. They won the National League pennant 5 times, win the World Series twice in the 70s in 75-76, and this was known as the Big Red Machine, featuring Hall of Fame members Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, and Terry Perez, as well as baseball's most controversial player, Pete Rose, the all-time hit leader. However, despite their decorated past, the Reds have struggled in recent years. And Clinton currently had the longest drought of not winning a playoff series of any team, with their last playoff series win coming in 1995. Been over 20 years. It's been 30 years since this last happened. However, despite that, though, they won 5 World Series championships, 9 National League pennants, and 10 division titles. So, the Reds definitely have a rich baseball history. And of course, the Reds is where professional baseball was born. Here in Cincinnati, of course. So many legendary players and coaches have played for the Reds. Rich history, of course. Obviously, their colors red, black, and white. And the player you see on here is Ellie De La Cruz, the modern star of the Reds, is who he is. So we're about to arrive into downtown Cincinnati for a bit. So as we arrive into downtown Cincinnati, let me give you some bit of information about this city. Cincinnati is actually technically the 3rd most populous city in Ohio with 309,000 people. However, its metro area is the largest in the state of Ohio, with 2.3 million residents. For much of the 19th century, Cincinnati was among the top 10 largest cities in the country. Due to its position around the Ohio River, of course, as an inland port for cargo shipping by steamboats. This city, as a result, in later years, it became industrialized and manufacturing. And in the 1800s, it was even referred to as the Paris of America due to its unique architectural projects like the Music Hall, Cincinnati Hotel, and the Roebling Suspension Bridge, built by the same guy who eventually did the Brooklyn Bridge in New York. Nowadays, of course, Cincinnati has the 20th largest economy in the U.S. with Fortune 500 companies like Kroger, GE Aerospace, and more making their homes here in Cincy. And of course, you can't forget about Cincinnati's rich history. It's rich history with music, rich music history, Lonnie Mack, Fats Waller. And more. Of course, Cincinnati's home of the chili dog, the Cincinnati chili, which is actually not made by traditional chili. It's actually made from a Greek recipe by Macedonian entrepreneurs in the 20s. In fact, there are more chili restaurants in Cincinnati per capita than any other place in the world. So Cincinnati chili is made from here, and of course, Cincinnati doesn't just have the Reds. Cincinnati is also home to the NFL's very own Cincinnati Bengals and Major League Soccer's very own FC Cincinnati. Rich history, of course. Cincinnati, really cool city. I did visit it a few times. Neat city. To our left is Cincinnati Covington Airport. That's where I flew out of for my flight out of Cincinnati. We made our way over to London. So really cool stuff. So we're about to arrive into downtown Cincinnati. So we're going to go ahead and weaken the power a little bit, slow her down, and we can fly over downtown Cincinnati. But yeah, Cincinnati, really cool city, rich history. But yeah, it's a neat city. Like I said, it's very underrated. Got some really cool stuff here in this. So we're going to go ahead and go back to our drone camera. So this is Cincy, everyone. But yeah, I do like streaming a little bit early in the morning too. I finally have a consistent schedule too. Also, for all your flight simmers, you guys now just got Sim Update 5, of course. I hope that's running well for all you guys for Sim Update 5. I know they did a lot of updates for Sim Update 5. Lots of different stuff. Lots of stability and fixes, of course. They finally got some PS5 VR support, which is good news for all you PS5 pilots. They added some new certifications for career mode, and they did tons of fixes for all sorts of planes, especially the 737 MAX and C-17. But absolutely huge. And I'm excited for May 5th when we get the ATR finally updated, because I can't wait to try out the ATR for all of it. So here it is, guys, downtown Cincinnati. You can see Great American Ballpark. There's Paycor Stadium, the home of the Bengals. And there's Great American Ballpark, home of the Reds. It's been their home since 2003, and it seats 43,000 people here. The home of the Reds now seats 43,000. So. Yeah, beautiful ballpark. But it looks absolutely gorgeous here today in downtown Cincy. Yeah, beautiful ballpark. Yeah, it looks nice here in Cincy. Go ahead and So here we go. So we're going to now go ahead and get to the Reds. Let's talk about some other parts of the Cincinnati Reds. As I said earlier, Great American Ballpark is the home of the Cincinnati Reds since 2003, replaced Synergy Field as their old ballpark. Of course, it's named that its corporate name. The name rights come from Great American Insurance, who purchased it for $75 million for 30 years. So, this new stadium is a baseball-only facility for the Reds, which is a really nice stadium. Of course, it did host the 2015 All-Star Game. But there's some pretty unique things about this ballpark. You see, American baseball stadiums have some unique features. One of which is, of course, they actually built a terrace on the plaza Joe Nuxle Way. But of course, one of the most famous features is in right center field, the steamboat power stacks, which were represented as the steamboats, and those smokestacks emit flashlights, emit flames, and launch fireworks to incite after home team's efforts. While fireworks are mainly used for every Reds home run and win. They also feature a 50 by 20 foot Indiana limestone bas relief in the main entrance to feature a young player looking up to heroic figures of a pitcher, batter, or fielder against many of the Cincinnati landmarks. And of course, their scoreboard is around 215 feet, which is the 9th largest scoreboard in baseball. So really neat stuff. Of course, they even have a Reds Hall of Fame museum. So they had some really cool stuff here too. And it features all sorts of Reds related gear and stuff. So if you're a big Cincinnati Reds fan, this is definitely the place to be. Now, the Reds did play in several other ballparks, of course, but the two ones I put notably are Crosley Field and Riverfront Stadium. The more famous of the two home stadiums was Crosley Field, which was the longtime home of the Reds from 1912 to 1970. This stadium is pretty unique. They built it in 1912. One very unique thing, it was actually built on an asymmetrical block bound by Finley Street, Western Avenue, Dalton Avenue, York Street, and McLean Avenue. And it's the first major league ballpark to have lights for playing night games. And the story how they played night games in Cincinnati was that during the Great Depression, Reds convinced baseball owners to allow night baseball across the field. And they said without lights, the Reds would fold due to low attendance. So they added lights. And eventually in 1935, the Reds played the Phillies on May 24th. And it was the first night game in Major League Baseball with 20,000 fans. And as a result, of course, with all the night games, it saved the Cincinnati Reds and had completely changed baseball, of course. The other thing this stadium is most known for, and its most infamous feature, is its infamous terrace, which was a 15-degree left field incline. This terrace, because it's one of the smallest parks in baseball, usually one of the smallest parks in baseball, they're in seating capacity, playing field size, and their terrace, and they mainly built it and they built it during its construction. But this terrace was pretty infamous, because as a result, and the grade made it very difficult for players to field sometimes, and it frustrated many outfielders, including visiting teams. So the terrace definitely pretty unique, though. It's a special little ballpark. And in addition to baseball, Crosley Field was also used for the Bengals, of course. It was also hosted the Beatles during 1966 on their final tour, and they even did a Cincinnati Pop Festival too. So pretty neat little ballpark. The other stadium is Riverfront. Now, unlike Crosley Field, it doesn't have any of the charm of it because it was made purposely as a multi-purpose stadium for both the Reds and Bengals. It also had artificial turf, and this stadium did have some history, most famously, of course, for the 1970 All-Star Game, for the infamous collision between Pete Rose and Ray Fosse of the Indians. That was one of the most famous incidents that happened. One feature that differentiate Riverfront was that the field level seats, which were divided in half directly behind home plate, and the stadium was imploded in December 29th, 2002 was the last time we see Riverfront Stadium. But of the two older stadiums, I would give me Crosley Field, even with it's got a lot more character to it. As a result. Another interesting thing about the Reds, of course, has been their classic uniforms. Just as classic as the team is its uniforms. They've mainly been wearing the C-bone red. The wishbone C logo has been around since the 19th century. And of course, they mainly wore red-white. However, due to the 50s, they changed from the Reds to the Cincinnati Redlegs because, unfortunately, communism was a thing. It was during McCarthyism. So the connection to communism, the color blue was added. And then, of course, in the 60s and 70s, it traditionally more moved to the red and white. Of course, the 90s have changed, and then, of course, their uniforms are somewhat similar too. The Reds have changed many times in uniforms. However, for most of us, the uniform that we all know, the Reds, was from 1967 to 1992. They brought the point back to the C insignia, which is the one you see here. They also wore all red caps, and they bore the simple C insignia and featured the Reds logo inside the red. And the away uniform just bore in Cincinnati in a block style across the uniform. And this was one of the most famous uniforms. And they were the last MLB team to wear primary uniforms of pullover jerseys and beltless pants. Of course, then in 1993 they changed it all, and nowadays the Reds mainly wore their uniforms since 2006, with the all-red design, white wishbone C, outline it black. So, pretty unique uniforms, pretty simple, nothing too flashy. The Reds have always kept things pretty simple, except for the C connects, which look pretty cool. With a modified C, and it's mainly all black. But pretty cool stuff. For the Reds, in addition to playing the Pirates, they have two other historic rivals. One, of course, their in-state interleague rival, the Cleveland Guardians. It was first introduced in 1989. The Ohio Cup was a preseason game between the Guardians and Reds. And those proved to be quite popular in the state, actually. They proved very well attended. Of course, with interleague play, the Ohio Cup ended briefly. However, it returned back in 2008 and serves the award for the team that has the better overall record in the series each year. And like I said, it was definitely pretty cool to have an in-state rivalry. The other one was the other intense rivalry in the 70s and 90s, the Dodgers-Reds rivalry, and they competed from 1970 to 1990. They had 11 1-2 finishes in the standing, and 7 of them being within 5.5 games from each other. Both these teams are quite bitter rivalries. You have the Big Red Machine, they clash with the Tommy Lasorda era Dodgers teams. And the Dodgers and Reds are very intense. Very passionate games, of course. Pretty big stuff. So now we can finally go ahead and talk. There's their affiliates. So for the Reds, their minor league affiliates are pretty simple, of course. For the Reds, we visited the AAA affiliate in Louisville. Their AA affiliate for the Reds has been the Chattanooga Lookouts. In Chattanooga, Tennessee, really neat city. Dayton, Ohio, the Dayton Dragons are the high A affiliates. Their single A affiliate is the Daytona Tortugas, the Turtles. From Daytona Beach, they play at Jackie Robinson Park. So pretty much most of the teams are around Ohio and Kentucky, Tennessee. And finally, of course, is their titles. 5 World Series championships for the Reds, 9 National League pennants. Both of those last came in 1990. 3 NL Central Division titles, most recently in 2012. 7-time National League titles, West titles, and 3 wildcard berths. They did make the postseason last year. I think they're looking like to get back to the postseason again this year. So finally, of course, is the players. And if I had to pick the greatest Cincinnati Red of all time, the Reds have so many legends, but this one's not that difficult. Because the greatest Cincinnati Red of all time is none other than Johnny Bench, who's probably also the greatest catcher ever, too. Born in Oklahoma City, played for the Reds. He played all of his career in Cincinnati from 1967 to 1983, and was the heart of the Big Red Machine. He is 14-time All-Star. He won the NL MVP twice, 2 World Series championships with the Big Red Machine. He was also a dominant player with his glove. It wasn't just his bat he was absolutely devastating. It was his glove, too. 10 gold gloves. And he's part of MLB's all-century and all-time teams. And he made it to the Hall of Fame in 1989. The greatest Red of all time, an absolute legend for the Reds. I mean, he could do it all. And no, but seriously, he actually could do it all. He could do everything. His bats, he could do it with his bat. He could do it with his glove. There is no one that could do what Johnny Bench could do. Of course, another legendary Red, equally as famous, is Pete Rose. Now, of course, he's not in the Hall of Fame because he had a bit of a gambling problem, which is the big black mark in his career. But Pete Rose, in spite of all of it, in spite of his black mark with gambling, the dude is an absolute insane hitting machine. The dude's Major League Baseball's all-time leading hit machine. No, not all of baseball history. Ichiro broke that record. But he's MLB's all-time hit leader, games played, at-bats, singles, and outs. 3-time World Series champion. He won an MVP, 2 Gold Gloves, and 17 All-Star games. And he would do it in 5 positions: second base, left fielder, right fielder, third baseman, and first baseman. The dude could play in all sorts of positions. But of course, he was banned from Major League Baseball in 1989 due to his gambling issues. Though in 2025, he was actually reinstated back to baseball, and now he became eligible for the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame. The question would ultimately be, would he finally be in the Hall of Fame? That would be the ultimate question. But if he does, it would definitely be a very interesting road for Pete Rose. I think it's a possibility for him to be in the Hall of Fame. He's eligible. Of course, his betting stuff is definitely... that's a good question. I'll have to keep an eye on Pete Rose. Then, of course, another legend, of course, is Joe Morgan. I know younger people may know Joe Morgan as a baseball broadcaster, but during his playing career, he was one of the greatest second basemen in baseball history. Started career in Houston, but the peak of Joe Morgan was in Cincinnati, and he has become an incredible hitting machine. And he was very good with both the bat and the glove. 10-time All-Star, 5-time Gold Glove. He won back-to-back MVPs in 1975 and 76. He won back-to-back MVPs. Not bad at all for being 5'7". He can absolutely hit the bat. Over 2,500 hits and 216 home runs. And of course, he became a very famous broadcaster, along with Bob Costas. Very famous broadcaster too. Massive legacy for the Reds. Then, of course, Frank Robinson became an absolute star, mostly with Baltimore, but Frank Robinson was still also a star for the Reds. Unfortunately, he then got traded to Baltimore, which was a very lopsided trade. That was a horrendous trade for the Reds. That was absolutely horrendous. Then, of course, you have the most modern Hall of Famer and the most recent Hall of Famer, the last major legend for the Reds, Barry Larkin. Played all 19 years in Cincinnati from 86 to 2004. 12-time All-Star, MVP in 1995, 9-time amazing slugging hitter, 9-time Slugger Award, and 3-time Gold Glove Award. Good old Barry Larkin, born and raised in Cincy as well. Incredible talent. Barry Larkin, you can't go wrong with his incredible talent, of course. Then we have some other icons for the Reds. Tony Perez, another legend of the Big Red Machine, Tony Perez. Absolute stud of a hitter. Joey Votto is one of the best Reds of the modern era. He's probably the most iconic Reds icon of the 2000s to 2010s. For most Reds fans, he has probably been the icon of the team for pretty much the 2010s. He's been the best Red. And been one of the most underrated players in baseball for pretty much the entire 2010s. Joey Votto, absolute legend. Probably, for me growing up, was probably my favorite Red is Joey Votto. You have Ted Kluszewski. Then we have Ellie De La Cruz, a modern star for the Reds. He's definitely got potential to be one of the best Reds of the 21st century. And there's plenty more icons in Cincinnati. So that covers the history of the Cincinnati Reds. We'll get some bit of rest stop here when we land at Pike County. And we'll make our way for a pit stop. And then we'll fly our way to Pittsburgh to talk about the Pirates. Lots of history and stuff here today for Pittsburgh. So let's see who's flying along with us today. Let's see if anyone else is joining along with us. Like I said, a lot of stuff going on here, of course. So for this week's sort of streams, of course, I know we have our flights tomorrow. Yes, we're doing the streams on Saturday because I want to do all the streaming stuff on the weekends, as the weekends give me the most flexibility and I don't have to worry about, so I have more flexibility within the week. So tomorrow we'll be doing our flight in Switzerland tomorrow. In the PC-6, we're going to go from Geneva over to Friedrichshafen in Germany. We're going to be the PC-6, a proper Swiss aircraft. The PC-6 will fly over into the beautiful landscape scenery of the mountains and lakes of Switzerland, which will be absolutely gorgeous. So many beautiful Swiss locations. Very excited. It's one of my favorite areas in Europe. Um, Sunday is going to be Isle Royale National Park in Michigan, one of the least visited national parks in the country. It's located in the Great Lakes. And we'll be taking the Cessna 172 floatplane for that one. So, and that one's going to be fun. We're going to have some great floatplane flying on Sunday. So, looking forward to this week's plan. As for the community, of course, for our incredible flight sim community, later tonight, Tuto Murphy will be back. He'll be doing a UK tour in the de Havilland Mosquito. Really neat little plane, by the way, the Mosquito. It was mainly built with wood in mind. But super incredible aircraft, of course. He'll be doing the flying across the UK. Allison's going to be back tomorrow. She'll be doing the MSFS stream for the Kentucky Derby, so you might want to pitch around for that. But Saturday, of course, is going to be her Ellie Beinhorn around the world flight, Istanbul over to Aliepo. So she's going to be doing that. Check out Allison Johnson. She's an absolute sweetheart and an amazing, amazing woman. She's been one of my absolute favorites for years. She's been an amazing person. Also, turns out she's also a big Reds fan, which I didn't know about for a while. I knew she was a Reds fan, but yeah. Guess me and Allie had those things. So, very excited though for the next week's of streaming, of course. So I do have plans for next week for the game day flights. So let me open the file. So I plan next week to be El Clasico. Our next game day flight will be El Clasico on May 8th. Barcelona and Real Madrid. I mean, come on. It's El Clasico. It's like the biggest game in Europe. I mean, not doing El Clasico is like saying you don't want to do anything major. It's not like doing the Red Sox Yankees. You would be a fool to not actually do it. So that's what's going to be next Saturday, of course. But I'm also been keeping an eye on the playoffs for the United States. And but the Champions League final is going to be May 31st. But yeah, the Champions League final is going to be on Saturday, May 31st. Is Saturday, May 30. Is May 30th, and that's going to be the Champions League final. But one of those May 30th is going to be the Champions League final, which is going to be a very big game, of course. If I were to be a betting man for the Champions League final, it's probably going to be PSG versus Atletico Madrid or Arsenal. Which in that case, we'll have to fly to Budapest, of course, for that. So if it's Atletico Madrid, we'll fly from Madrid over to Paris, and then Paris over to Budapest for that one. If it's Atletico Madrid to Arsenal, I'll have to fly Madrid to London and London over to Budapest. So some of these streams are going to be a bit long, so, but either way, it's not going to be boring. That's for sure. And of course, in June is going to be the NBA and the Stanley Cup final. Depends on which one would be more attractive. I'm also doing this game called Sky Cards. Let me give you a link for that in the chat. If you don't know about Sky Cards, this is what I've actually been doing for. It's this. Let me show you the website. You can get it on your App Store or Google Play, and it's called Sky Cards. It's basically using. It's made by the guys at Flight Radar 24, and you catch real-time flights to build your card deck. And you can get all sorts of planes by different rarity and all that. It's basically card collecting games, but with airplanes. And you also have a bit of trophies too. You can get trophies for like getting all sorts of different rarities, from common to ultra, to super, just to that. You can get card collections, get all the locations, including Antarctica, to Asia, Europe, and all that. You can collect Boeings, some really unique aircraft. So I think we're about to our first stop of the day, our first of our 2 stops here in Pike County. So we're going to go ahead and prepare for our landing here at. We'll get ahead for our first landing here at Kilo Echo Oscar Papa. So here we go, guys. Our final, the second to last stop. We'll stop right here for just a bit. So we're here at Pike County Airport in Ohio. So we'll be making our way over there as well. In terms of big other matches I could have picked this weekend, the MLS did have some interesting ones for Inter Miami Orlando was another one I considered. And in England, one other interesting matchup I could have picked this week for other sports was, let's see. don't think there was that many interesting matches. Manchester United and Liverpool, but I already did them earlier in the season, so I don't want to do Manchester United Liverpool again. So definitely some pretty interesting games though. And Flamengo and Vasco was also another one too from in Brazil, but I ultimately decided to pick this one today since it's baseball season. Try to mix things up. Yeah, Sky Cards though, really cool app. So let's go ahead and get ready for the second to last leg of the trip. Let me look at the fuel. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the load into the air, load immediately. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go 67 degrees. So and we're off we go. So we're climbing up. So we're coming up to 1,000 feet a minute. So we're going to climb up in the Twin Otter. Let's do it. Do it to it. So, some other pretty big things going on as well in our sports. We have the NBA playoffs so far. Of course, some bits of the first round, the Thunder have taken care of their first round, but they swept the Suns. No surprise. And then the Rockets and Lakers. LA is they lost the last. They were up 3-0 in the first 3 games, and then they lost the last 2. Tonight's going to be Game 6. If the Lakers win, they advance the next round. But if the Rockets win, they force Game 7. Minnesota beat the Nuggets last night to go to the second round, and then the Spurs took care of the Blazers 2 nights ago. And then the East is even more chaotic. The Orlando could end the series tonight if they beat the Pistons, which would be the first 8 seed upset a 1 seed in quite a long time. The last time that's ever happened, the 8 seed being the 1 seed, was in 2012. To the 8 seed. So Orlando could actually make history. The Cavaliers are up 3-2 against the Raptors. The Knicks won their series yesterday pretty resoundingly, 140-89, and then Game 7 tomorrow between the Celtics and Sixers. Can you even imagine the pure chaos if the Magic and Sixers won their series tonight and tomorrow? Can you even imagine how crazy the Eastern Conference could be? The chaos is going to be unprecedented in the East. This is going to be a very unpredictable postseason in the NBA. So, for the college basketball stuff, of course, since that happened while I was gone, April 6th, of course, Michigan beat UConn in the national championship for men's basketball, giving Michigan's first title since 1989. Big win for Michigan basketball fans. They defeated UConn. And then on the women's side of things, UCLA wins their first Division I national championship for UCLA basketball, completing a 37-1 season for UCLA basketball. Big win for the Lady Bruins. Big win for them. And then finally, for ever Canadians' favorite league, the NHL, is ever Canadians' favorite playoffs. Has been pretty much set for the NHL. For the Western Conference, Colorado sweep the Kings, which I'm not surprised the Avalanche swept the Kings. That's not that surprising. But the Minnesota Wild beat the Stars. That's a pretty big win for the Minnesota Wild. The Vegas Golden Knights are 3-2 against the Utah Mammoth. And then the Anaheim Ducks, unbelievably, the Ducks beat the Edmonton Oilers 4-2. Which was absolutely huge for the Ducks. That was a big series win for the Anaheim Ducks. The Ducks this year were one of the lower-ranked teams to make the playoffs, and the Ducks got a massive win for the Anaheim Ducks. Then in the Eastern Conference, the Buffalo Sabres are up 3-2. The Sabres had an unbelievable year this year in Buffalo, and now the Sabres are 1 game away from winning the playoff series, which they haven't won since 2012. Then the Lightning in Montreal. Montreal's up 3-2 against the Lightning. The Carolina Hurricanes swept the Ottawa Senators, and then of course the Battle of the Keystone State goes to the Flyers, as they took care of their rivals in Pittsburgh, 4-2. So should be an interesting NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. I think the finals probably going to be Colorado and Buffalo, and I hope for the Sabres to win. The city of Buffalo deserves a championship. Give the title to the Sabres. Buffalo has been wanting the title for years. And Font put the memories of 1999 to rest. So, that's just my thoughts. So, let's go ahead and talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates for a bit. Our last team for today. The Pirates, of course, out of Pittsburgh. The Buccos, of course. Established all the way back in 1882. They were part of the American Association in 1881. They joined the National League in 1887 and was a member of the NL East until from 1969 to 1983. Then they moved to the National League Central. 5-time World Series champions, 9 National League pennants, 9-time NL East division titles, and 3 appearances in the wild card game. For the start of the 20th century, they were actually the best teams in baseball, including playing in the inaugural World Series in 1903, and they won their first title in 1909 behind the bat of legendary Hannes Wagner. In 1925, they won their second title and were the first team in North American sports to overcome a 3-1 series deficit to win a playoff series. Then their next one was 1960, which was a legendary World Series, ended with a legendary walk-off home run by Bill Mazeroski. I'll talk more about him. And it was the only time in Game 7 ended in a home run. Then they won one in 1979 with Roberto Clemente, and their last in 1979 under Willie Stargell. However, since their last World Series title, the Pirates have entered a period of great struggle. The Pirates have only had 11 winning seasons, 6 postseason appearances, 3 division titles, and advanced just once in the postseason in 2013 since their last World Series win. They even had 20 consecutive seasons of losing records from 1993 to 2012, a record in both Major League Baseball and any of the 4 North American professional sports leagues. The 5th longest World Series drought, and the longest NLCS championship appearance drought in all of baseball. So yes, the Pirates have been, and I kind of feel for Pirates fans because this is a team with a rich history, and the Pirates have some great players over the years. It's just they've never been quite lucky, if you know what I'm getting at. So the Pittsburgh Pirates, for all you guys know, they play at PNC Park, which in my opinion is one of the very best stadiums in Major League Baseball. Opened in 2001 to replace Three River Stadium. This is an absolutely gorgeous venue for baseball. It's right across the river from the Pittsburgh skyline. Absolutely beautiful stadium. Seats 30,000 people. It's retro classic, featured unique features, limestone for the facade, riverside concourse, outside scoreboard, and of course it's a great place for food. And many people say that this is one of the best stadiums in baseball, thanks to its location, views of the Pittsburgh skyline and the Allegheny River. Thomas design and clear angles of the field from every seat. This stadium is really cool as well. They've made several alterations in the league, mainly with smoking. They added some new sections. They made improvements for and of course, it's hosted many baseball events. It hosted the 2006 MLB All-Star Game in Pittsburgh. One of the other major events it's also hosted is college baseball. It's hosted plenty of concerts, of course, from Bruce Springsteen to Jason Aldean, Rolling Stones, Fall Out Boy, Metallica, and more have hosted concerts here. And more importantly, too, this stadium is also blessed with some really good eateries. This is definitely a great ballpark for food. Of course, Permane Brothers sandwiches are here, Mrs. T's Pierogies, Augustine's Pizza, and more. But really neat stadium. PNC Park is an absolutely gorgeous venue, and it's definitely a place, if you're a baseball fan, to at least check out. It's a beautiful stadium. One of the prettiest in Major League Baseball. Of course, there's 2 other notable ballparks for the Pirates, Forest Field and Three Rivers Stadium, but I gotta talk about Forest Field, which played for them from 1909 to 1970, again, just like the Reds Stadium is. In fact, Crosley Field, its last game was June 24th, 1970. This was June 28th, 1970. So guess what? Those two stadiums closed within 4 days of each other. Moved out of their stadiums 4 days from each other. But this stadium also served home for the Pittsburgh Steelers and for the University of Pittsburgh. This stadium is a really historic ballpark. It was actually made of concrete and steel, the first concrete and steel ballpark in the National League. It featured a large plane surface with the batting cage in the deep part of center field, and was altered many times throughout its history. Of course, some unique features of the ballpark included its brick walls made of brick, and some of it was covered in ivy, of course. But of course, they reduced the bound lines from 376 to 300 feet. And then, of course, they erected a 20-foot high screen to discourage a lot of the 350-foot home runs. And they made it a pretty pitcher-friendly ballpark. Nowadays, some parts of the stadium actually still stand. And mainly in the University of Pittsburgh, you can find some of the remnants of the old stadium. The wall is still there. Some parts of the outfield wall are still here. The force field outfield wall and flagpole are still standing, even after all these years. And there's still a monument, but it's a really cool stadium too. Force Field is definitely historic, and there's so many iconic moments in that ballpark. The other stadium is Three Rivers Stadium, which was the multi-purpose ballpark to replace it. Fun fact, only 13 home runs were ever launched into the upper deck of the stadium. And the all-time leader of those upper deck shots was Willie Stargell with 4 of them. Jeff Bagwell had 2 of them, and most of the other players hit it once. But it was not really great for baseball because, again, multi-purpose stadiums, they're not really designed for baseball. So that's why Three Rivers Stadium is not there today. And thank goodness it's not, because they replaced it with one of the best ballparks in the sport, in PNC Park. So for Force Field in particular, the dimensions have changed, but when it was in its last configuration in 1959, it had 300 feet in right field, 375 in right center, and it goes all the way to the deepest part at 457 feet is the deepest part of the park. Left center is now around 406, and left field is at a pretty distant 365 feet. Very unique ballpark, of course. Force Field, a really neat stadium for baseball, of course. So pretty neat stuff here about the ballparks, of course. So yeah, really neat stuff about Ford Field, of course. But there have been some pretty weird ones, of course. Some really historic ones. So. Hey, good to see you, Jimbo Fox. I hope you're doing well, Jimbo. We're in the DHC 6 Twin Otter. So we're in the Twin Otter. Really neat plane, of course. Oh, and I need to go back to the camera. Whoops. So yeah, this is the Mighty Twin Otter. It's a really cool plane. In real life, this is a workhorse aircraft. Perfect for STOL taking off and landing, STOL operations, short takeoffs and landings. Of course, so really neat aircraft, obviously. So really, really neat aircraft. Perfect for a lot of the short. The flight deck. Let me show you, Jimbo. This is the flight deck of the Twin Otter. So you can see your flight deck. Reverse thrust? Yes, there's reverse thrust. Reverse is up here and it goes all the way here. Don't want to do it. I don't want to accidentally crash this plane. But yeah, you can do reverse thrust. So you can do. So yeah, the reverse thrust makes it really, really good for short takeoffs. I mean, this is why they fly this plane into little old Saba Airport. Which, by the way, Saba is only 1,300 feet, which is really short. And that means there are not many planes that can fly out here. And that means you either take the Twin Otter or you take the Islander. It's one of those two. And helicopters can land here too. But it's a really neat airport, though. Like I said, that Twin Otter is just the perfect aircraft for island flying. So, perfectly great aircraft for it, obviously. So, one of the really big things, in terms of aviation stuff, of course, obviously with some very big news, of course. Alaska Airlines, really one of the really cool things about Alaska is they now just started their first ever flights over to Rome earlier in the week. First ever trip from Seattle to Rome, becoming their first ever flight from Seattle to Rome. It was earlier in the week. And it's actually the only daily direct connection between the two cities, which is pretty cool though. Seattle to Rome. I mean, fair play to Alaska Airlines to do some more flying out of Seattle. It is about a 10-hour flight, about nearly 11-hour flight, but it's still really historic though to finally have some flying from here to Rome. Really cool though. So pretty cool stuff. So let's go and talk more about Pittsburgh then for the Pirates, obviously. A bit more about their history, of course. The logos and uniforms of the Pirates have had many changes over the years. But one interesting thing that has changed in the early years of the Pirates, they were not always the famous black and gold. They actually wore red, white, and blue like many of the other teams in baseball during the first half of the 20th century. And they mainly wore a blue cap with a red or white P, and they were often pretty plain. The team's names would not be in the uniforms, of course, again, until 1933. However, what would ultimately change in Pittsburgh was 1948 was when things forever changed in Pittsburgh, because they broke away from red, white, and blue when they adopted the gold and black and gold color scheme to match those of the Pittsburgh flag, as well as the Pittsburgh Steelers. And they changed their colors to then. And they became black and gold, which is the color scheme you now see all the time. They did sleeveless jerseys in the 1950s and helped popularize sleeveless jerseys, of course. They were also the first team in baseball to sport a pullover nylon cotton jersey and beltless pants, becoming the first team to wear such a look and became very popular around the league. Of course, they did ditched it in 1991, one of the last teams. One of the more unique things the Pirates have ever wore is that during its 100th anniversary, the Pirates wore a pillbox style hat with horizontal pinstripes, becoming the only team to actually adopt it. And they actually wore these hats into 1987. So the Pirates definitely have some really cool hats and some really cool uniforms as well. But really cool stuff for the Pirates. Of course, they're faded the black and gold. In terms of other rivalries, though, the Pittsburgh Pirates have two big outside of the Reds. They used to have a huge rivalry with the Phillies. Back in the old days, it was one of the best rivalries in the National League until the divisions got realigned. And these rivals were very bitter because obviously Philadelphia and Pittsburgh are big rivals in many sports, and baseball was no different. And even though the divisions were split in 1969, they were still part of the same division, and they competed a lot for the NL East. For a large amount of the NL East championships were won by the Pirates and Phillies. They won 15 of the 25 NL East championships during that span. Of course, once the Pirates moved to the NL Central, the rivalry diminished. However, many older fans still say that this is still the bigger rivalry for the Pirates. The other rivalry for them is the Detroit Tigers, which is their main interleague rival, is the Detroit Tigers. And even though they only became natural rivals because the other teams were paired up, however, it has become popular with both teams due to the fact the Red Wings and Penguins have had a pretty big rivalry in the NHL. And the teams also have connections within different cities as well. And as a result, there is an interleague rivalry with the Tigers. So pretty interesting sets of rivalries, of course, for the Pirates. The Pirates also have a pretty sizable fan base, though for the Pirates, of course, they've had some notable fans, like Bing Crosby, who's a part-time owner, Michael Keaton and Regis Philbin. The Pirates are considered to be a distant third in Pittsburgh, behind the Steelers and Penguins. And a lot of the reason that is due is because, unfortunately, the Pirates haven't as much success as those other two. Of course, the Steelers have won their 6 Super Bowls and have always been a consistent contender for the playoffs. The Penguins really grew during the 90s and 2000s, thanks to guys like Mario Lemieux, Jaromir Jagr, Sidney Crosby, and Evgeny Malkin have been massively successful to get the Penguins their 5 Stanley Cups. The Pirates really struggled, and you all know about the Pirates over decades of struggles. That being said, though, the Pirates are still loyal fans. The people who support the Pirates are still incredibly loyal fans, and they're very passionate ones as well. So, very big deal, though. The Pirates are definitely very passionate fans, and the ones who support them are very loyal bunch of fans. And I hope Pittsburgh Pirates fans get to have some success. That's coming as a Reds fan. Now let's look at their AAA affiliates. The Pirates AAA affiliates is the Indianapolis Indians. In Indianapolis, of course, they play at Victory Field, which is a really nice minor league stadium. Victory Field's a very nice minor league ground. Definitely one of the nicest minor league stadiums in baseball is Victory Field. And yes, unlike the one in Cleveland, they actually get to keep their name. And that's because in Indiana, they managed to retain their nickname and partner with the local Indian tribe, the Miami Nation of Indiana, to let them keep their name. Their AA affiliate is the Altoona Curve in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Then their high A affiliate is the Greensboro Grasshoppers in Greensboro, North Carolina. and their single A affiliate is the Bradenton Marauders of the Florida State League in Bradenton. So now, of course, and then of course you have their 5 World Series titles, their 9 NL pennants, their 9 NL East Division titles. Yes, they still haven't won a division title since 1992, and not in 3 wildcard berths for the Pirates. And finally, for Pittsburgh is going to be some of their iconic legends. But if I had to pick the greatest Pirates, it's the guy you see on the picture. Yes, it's the one, the only, Roberto Clemente himself, born and raised in Puerto Rico, the greatest Puerto Rican player of all time, simply known as the Great One. He attracted the attention of the Brooklyn Dodgers. However, the Dodgers sent him to the minor leagues, and of course, the Pirates drafted him in 1954, and the rest became history because Clemente was an absolute stud. Was a 15-time All-Star. He was the MVP in MVP in 1966, 2-time World Series champion in 1960-1971, 4-time batting champion, and 12 Gold Gloves. And of course, he's also the namesake of the Roberto Clemente Award, due to his involvement in the community, sportsmanship, and exemplifies the game of baseball. And nothing more certified that award than of course his service with the Nicaragua earthquake. Unfortunately, he passed away at only 38 years old in a plane crash. Which was absolutely tragic, though. And it ended up killing Roberto Clemente. But the dude's a legend. 317 batting average, and he got exactly 3,000 hits. But Roberto Clemente, absolute stud, and he was not just a really great hitter. Clemente is absolutely beloved in both Puerto Rico. He's absolutely idolized in Puerto Rico. He's the Puerto Rico what people in Argentina think of Maradona. The Puerto Ricans view him the same way. And of course he's beloved in Pittsburgh. And like I said, Clemente is absolutely an incredible talent. Like I said, he's just as big off and on the field. So, huge player. Next is Honus Wagner, one of the earliest major superstars of the game. Honus Wagner, born in Charlersboro, Pennsylvania, played 21 seasons of baseball from 1897 to 1917, known as the Flying Dutchman. He first played in Louisville, believe it or not. However, in 1899, he left Louisville to join the Pirates in 1900, and probably the rest was history because Honus Wagner was a 5-tool player who has his arm, incredible throwing arm, great fielding capabilities, and he can hit for average and power. The dude can play any position. The Dutchman was an incredible talent. And considered to be the greatest shortstop the game has ever seen, even after all these years. And he was so good, he was inaugurated in the original first 5 members of the Baseball Hall of Fame. So the dude hit 328, 3,400 hits, 1,700 RBIs. He stole 723 stolen bases. He won the NL batting champion 8 times, which is still a record. Which is still one of the records for the NL batting champions. So I think it's the most records. Honus Wagner, and he shares the record with Tony Gwynn for the most NL batting titles with 8. He's also 4-time RBI leader of the National League and 5-time stolen base leader of the National League. And he's part of the All-Century team, an all-time team for Major League Baseball. I mean, he's an incredible talent, and his legacy is absolutely enormous. Absolutely huge legacy for Honus Wagner. The next player is Willie Stargell. He was another star of the 1960s and 70s, was Willie Stargell. Pops. Played all 21 seasons in Pittsburgh from 1962 to 1982. A 7-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champion. He won the NL MVP in 1979. Absolute menace with the bat. He did get a Roberto Clemente Award. And of course, he was a very fair power hitter. 475 home runs. Absolute menace for the Pirates. And he hit some very long home runs during his career. One of his most famous home run. One of his longest home runs he's ever hit. He once hit a 507-foot home run at Dodger Stadium in 1969, the longest ever at the stadium, of course. He hit it completely out of Dodger Stadium. He hit it out of Dodger Stadium, of course, which is pretty impressive. And of course, the longest home run he ever hit was 535 feet out of Olympic Stadium in Montreal. Absolute insane power hitter. And of course, Stargell was an absolute legend there. Then the next player on the list, of course, is Ralph Kiner. He was another icon for the Pirates. Number 4, Ralph Kiner. Big legend for the Pirates. Especially in the late 40s, early 50s. He did serve during the World War II in the U.S. Navy. So it delayed his playing career for a bit. But he was a 6-time All-Star for the Pirates. 7-time leader in home runs for them. However, Ralph Kiner, an absolute home run machine. He 369 total home runs. However, unfortunately, his back injury forced him to retire at just 32. But really big player and a very big legacy for Pirates fans. Then, of course, Bill Mazeroski, the guy who hit the famous home run in the 1960 World Series to win them for the Pirates. But he was also a Hall of Fame caliber talent. The guy was a 10-time All-Star and was an incredible defensive player with 8 Gold Gloves, giving him a really great defensive player as well, making him a very talented second baseman. He is one of the best fielded second basemen in MLB history. Absolutely incredible guy for his defense. So, people kind of forget the home run. It kind of overshadows what he's been as a player. You have Dave Parker, one of the newest Pirates Hall of Famer, Dave Parker, the Cobra, who just got in the Hall of Fame in 2025. He finally got to be in the Hall of Fame. Was an incredible with both the bat and really good with the glove, too. Unfortunately, he passed away on June 28th, 2025, just before the Hall of Fame. So his son took his place, but Dave Parker was definitely an amazing player for the Pirates. And then some of the other players mentioned include Andrew McCutchen, been the longtime loyal Pirate of Andrew McCutchen. He's been the modern star for the Pirates. He's been one of the best players for the modern Pirates. And of course, their modern star is Paul Skeens. And there are plenty of other players. Hey, Shaq, good to see you. I had a great time vacation, Shaq. I hope you're doing well, my dude. Yes, we're baseball. Of course, the United States. We're doing the Reds and Pirates today. Been wanting to do some baseball here. Of course, if you don't know, Shaq, baseball was actually my very first series I've done on Twitch called Play Ball. It was my very first series, and we did all 30 of the Major League Baseball teams. Very excited to actually do this again. It brings me back to when I first streamed. So we started in Louisville, where we went to Cincinnati earlier. We stopped at Pike County Airport, and then we fly on our way over to Pittsburgh for the Pirates. McCutchen's still playing today. McCutchen is a part of the Rangers now. He actually had 2 stints in Pittsburgh. Then he bounced around a few teams. Then had a second stint in Pittsburgh and now back in Texas. But during his peak, In Pittsburgh, McCutcheon was a 5-time All-Star, 4 Silver Sluggers, a Gold Glove, and yes, the dude even won an MVP in 2013. Yes, the dude was an NL MVP. But yes, he was an absolute beloved Pirate. One of the more beloved of the modern Pirates. He won MVP. He had an absolutely insane season. 317, 21 home runs, 84 RBIs. Absolute doubles machine and stolen base. He was absolutely incredible, though. So, I do remember you saying I shall my cup of tea and chill. No worries. No worries, Shaq. I did have some good old tea as well in the United Kingdom. I got some hot tea. I actually liked some of the hot tea I had during my time in the UK and all that. It turns out I enjoy a cup of Earl Grey. No, really, I actually enjoyed the... I enjoyed both English breakfast tea and the Earl Grey. Good, like I said. But like I said, I enjoy that. Oh yeah, really cool. I've been trying some stuff. Like I said, as an American, you don't get to have access to hot teas, but I tried that for a bit. I thought, try something a little different. It turns out I really enjoy this sort of stuff. Hey, I know there's way more than that, and I know in England they do, in the United Kingdom they have way more different varieties, of course. But at least I try something new, because the tea I usually drink in America is, well, the iced tea varieties in the United States, which is more popular here in the States, of course. And sweet tea, especially, and sweet tea is also very popular in the South. So, but hey, I mean, try something new a bit. I never really tried it, so I thought, why not? Try something new, try something different, and like I said, expand my taste a bit. So, but yeah, I had a great time. Amazing places. Shaq, I got to visit. Barcelona was really cool. Cardiff was nice, too. Cardiff was really nice. Uh, Florence, Pisa was great. Rome was awe-inspiring. It just took me by shock, just Rome. Uh, it's like, it was just so overwhelming in Rome. Where do I even begin with it? Ajaccio was nice. Toulon was my least favorite, but it was still a pretty nice port, though, too. But I had a great time. But like I said, really, really enjoyed my time on the trip. Really great. Um, Glad I got to finally visit these major cities, which is just really great. Uh, um, there was a bit of rough sailing. If you go to the Bay of Biscayne, which is between France and Spain, is the Bay of Biscay. It was a little rough, a little bit of rocking, but it wasn't that bad, honestly. But it wasn't actually that bad when we got to there. The Mediterranean, thankfully, though, for Southampton was pretty smooth, however. The Mediterranean, for all of it, was quite smooth, thankfully. Yeah, yeah, there's plenty of deep water there, too. But really, really did enjoy the trip. Sadly, that will be my last time in Europe for a while, because with the rising fuel prices for aviation fuel prices, made flights more expensive. It's made it very, very, very tough. Yeah, exactly. I done it all. Yeah, pretty good. Exactly. Got to do all that sort of stuff. I got tons of pictures in my Discord, so I might show it off on next Saturday though, because I'm going to be needed to do this Saturday. I gotta keep my eyes focused when we're going to go through Switzerland um, on Saturday, because I plan that to be my first variety stream um, through all of it. Because I have a friend here in the community that lives around Constance and Radolfzell, and I wanted to do a flight plan that goes through much of the rivers and stuff of Switzerland. So, I wanted to do something a bit different. But I will definitely show you guys pictures next Saturday. Be more than happy to. Can't wait. Though, if I do return back to Europe in the future, I did talk to my mom and dad, but the next time I want to visit Europe and I want to check it out, I wanted to do it's either we'll do the three options would be we either do visiting in Iceland or Norway, but we just move into a later date, so we get to visit the fjords of Norway and Iceland, which was what we were supposed to do for next year, but that changed. Second would be the Baltics. Get to visit Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Estonia. Estonia and Germany. So we'll visit the Baltic Sea. We'll get to check out places such as Copenhagen, Stockholm, Helsinki, Tallinn, and Bournemouth. We'll visit those places, of course. It'd be one of those places. That would be second option, because plus, I mean, I'm really interested to visit Stockholm, Helsinki, Tallinn, and Copenhagen. Would all be really neat cities to visit. The third option, what I was thinking about in Europe, is the Canary Islands. I know a lot of you Europeans love flying to the Canaries, but as an American, I would be really interested in checking them out. Honestly, a lot of the places go to Funchal in Madeira. That's supposed to be really pretty to check out Madeira. And of course, some of the other destinations go to Tenerife, La Palma, and I think Lanzarote is one of the ones considered. And then they also sometimes go up to Lisbon, which is in Portugal. So that's probably the three trips in Europe that I think if we ever go back to Europe, I think it's going to be one of those three going to Europe, if we ever come back into the future. Because I think all three of these would have some really cool itineraries, because I think they're all interesting. I like the Baltics because it reminds me a bit about Canada, New England, or the UK trip that I did 2 years ago. Actually, last year. We did last year, but it would be pretty similar in a lot of ways. Just be further east. Iceland, Norway, be some way similar to Alaska, but it's in Europe. And then, of course, the Canaries is, I think it's like to you guys what the Caribbean is for a lot of us here in North America. It'd be like the Caribbean, but it's much more developed. So, but yeah, I'm curious to see where we're gonna go next in Europe. I'm like I said, I'm gonna have to wait and see what we're going to do. That's all. So enough of talking about that. I want to. That's a nice place. They have playing YouTube in Madeira. Oh yeah, Madeira. Well, our virtual airline I'm a part of was in Madrid. We have a new hub in Madrid for my virtual airline I'm part of, Firefly Air. They have a new hub in Madrid, and I did a flight in Madeira a couple days ago. Very windy, to say the least. The winds have always been pretty crazy in Madeira. But very fun flying in Madeira. Very neat airport. And of course, it's also named after the most famous person from the island. A certain... And it's named after a famous certain Cristiano Ronaldo. He's actually from Funchal, believe it or not. It's supposed to be an absolute gorgeous island, like I said. So, but like I said, very cool though. I'm interested to see what we pick. I don't have my next trip all the way to August. My next trip, by the way, is going to be out of San Francisco. We'll have to fly to San Francisco for Alaska, but we're flying to San Francisco for a 10-day Alaska trip in August. But the reason we picked that one is, of course, is because some of the destinations are now different. That was the only Alaska cruise where we had different destinations. Because we did an entire 14-day Alaska trip 2 years ago. And it went all 14 days into Alaska. We got to visit so many really cool places, but San Francisco was the only one that did some new stuff. It was... But some of the new places though is going to be, I think it. I'll change the date. Which August is it going to be? Oh, Prince Rupert and Wrangell was going to be one of the new destinations. Yeah, it was going to be Haines and Prince Rupert was going to be the two new ones. No, actually, it was Wrangell and Prince Rupert. That was going to be the two new ones out of San Francisco, which was going to be pretty cool, though. We've never been to San Francisco. We've been to LA once, but never San Francisco. So, should be an interesting trip coming up for Alaska. Alaska's always been one of our favorites. Just because Alaska has such great scenery. Southeast Alaska is absolutely gorgeous. And we had some amazing time at the ports. The last couple times we've been to Alaska, we've had some amazing ports. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, and speaking about baseball in San Francisco, I might want to check out Oracle Park. Really nice stadium, though, of course. Oracle Park is supposed to be a really nice stadium, though, too. Hopefully, I want to see if I can get a tour at Oracle Park, because they got an amazing stadium right on the San Francisco Bay. You got McCovey Cove at right field. You got a view of McCovey Cove. Absolutely gorgeous stadium. They got right field, really unique right field with McCovey Cove. And many players have hit splash hits now in the ballpark. Some really cool stuff. I'm going to do a career mode flight sim while you're on. Oh, nice, Shaq. Neat. So here it is, guys. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania is coming up right ahead of us. Is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is also where our Firefly Air's East Coast hub is at. Is here in Pittsburgh. I've flown this area very nicely, but Pittsburgh is actually a pretty nice area to fly in and out to. It's actually a pretty cool city. But if you guys don't know about Pittsburgh, so a bit of trivia about the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh's Pennsylvania's second biggest city after Philadelphia. Known as the Steel City due to its rich history of steel industry for the 19th and 20th centuries. Was once a very wealthy city. A lot of the people of the Gilded Age have actually built around this area. There's over 400 bridges in this city because it's split by the three rivers. Some incredible institutions like the Carnegie Museums, Pittsburgh Zoo, and the Phipps Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, and the National Aviary. All make their homes here in Pittsburgh. And of course, the city is rich with culture of jazz, blues, and bluegrass. Nowadays, it's more for the U.S.'s metal scene, of course. And of course, Pittsburgh's got a lot of food. Specialized in pierogies, kielbasa, chip chop ham sandwiches, and Klondike bars. And of course, Permane Bros is also a very famous institution here in the city. So, here's Pittsburgh. Here's Pittsburgh, the Steel City. There's the Steelers Stadium, Acrisure Stadium, home of the Steelers. So there's the Steelers home ground. So there's the rest of downtown. There's the University of Pittsburgh ahead of us. Is Pitt. Yeah, if you guys don't know, the University of Pittsburgh is the main cultural, is the main university here. And one of its most famous landmarks is the Cathedral of Learning. That big cathedral building here. There's the Cathedral of Learning. It's here left. This is 535 feet tall, the tallest educational building in the Western Hemisphere, and the second tallest one in the world is here in Pittsburgh. And it was completed in 1934. It was built in 1926. But this is an absolute insane building, though. Insane building. There it is. So, beautiful building, and you can see the three rivers. It's an absolutely pretty city to visit. So, here's Pittsburgh, of course, and that concludes our trip here in Pittsburgh. Let's fly to Allegheny County Airport. This was once used to be the commercial airport for Pittsburgh. However, that was changed in the 1950s, of course, when they built the modern Pittsburgh International Airport. Nowadays, AGC is now mainly a GA airport. At one point, it was once the third largest airport in the country. and the only hard service airport in the United States, of course. It was built back in 1931, but still days, this airport's still busy with business travelers. But it's a neat little airport, of course. And some of the people who visit this airport include Harold Gaddy and Wiley Post visited this airport. So some pretty neat visitors have visited Allegheny County Airport. So here it is. Here's Allegheny County Airport. We're about to make our arrival here. Well, Pittsburgh International, the bigger one in the hub for Firefly Air, was built in 1952. It used to be one of the most important hubs for U.S. Airways. At one point, this airport peaked at 20 million passengers. Nowadays, it's capped around 9.8 million people, almost 10 million people a year, but it's still half of what it was just 30 years ago. But that being said, Pittsburgh International is still a very important airport for Western Pennsylvania. And they just completed their big new terminal too, their big third terminal. Here we go. And we're down. Well, that's it, everyone. You know a lot more about me. No worries, Shaq. I'd be more happy to help you with that, with the knowledge. So that's it, everyone. Welcome to Pittsburgh and Allegheny County Airport. And that wraps up today's stream, everyone. So thank you all so much for joining me on today's flight. This was a really exciting trip. I hope you guys enjoyed this flight. So we'll be back tomorrow morning in Switzerland, of course, in Geneva. So we'll be heading back. Let me see who I can find a raid. Let's see who I can find a raid. We're going to raid. I think we'll raid Rapunzel for today. He's on right now, so we're gonna go ahead and raid him. So guys, I hope you have a great start to your weekend. I hope you all enjoyed the rest of your Friday. We'll see you tomorrow morning. So take care, guys, and have a fantastic rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone.